Kerry.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you very much for having us. We really want to tell you what you want to know. So I'm going to just go through a few bits and pieces as to how, or where I came from and how I came to do Fashion Week in the first place, what the basic premise of it was, and then we'd like to open it up. I think they've already got some questions they want to ask us about. So Fashion Week started in 2001. I was brought up in Christchurch and was married well over 50 years ago now. I went to the same school all my life, from when I was 5 to what would now be year 13. And I know that's not happened to any of you because you've all had to come to King's at an older age, haven't you? But it's very restricting, so don't ever do that to your kids, because you come out the other end not having to meet other people, not having to put yourself out to join in with other people. And I was so shy, I really was petrified when I moved to the country and had to go and meet all of these new people when I got married. Saving grace for me, when I lived at Hororata, where I still live, which is in mid-Canterbury, was joining some of the local organisations like the Ski Club and Plunket and PTA, which all local areas have schools and plunkets and things like that, and going on the committees, because you very quickly sort of learn all sorts of things. After 12 years, when I had 4 children, I bought a model agency. And I just want to explain how my career is very much serendipitous. I didn't really plan anything too much. So one day a friend of mine rang me and said, would you like to buy a model agency? She owned it. And I said, oh, I don't know, I haven't thought of doing anything like that. So I thought about it, and when my husband came in for lunch, I said, I wouldn't mind having a go at that. So I did. I hadn't run a business, I didn't know what to do. But 5 years of that, I very quickly learned how to run a small business and a lot of people. After that, I worked with Fashion Quarterly, which is still a magazine that's still going, some of you will know it, which was based in Christchurch at that time, being run by Paula Ryan and her husband Don Hope. I worked there until they shifted to Auckland, and that was probably the biggest learning curve of my career, because I'd never worked in publishing and there was so much to learn. Mind you, a lot has changed now with digitisation, but it was a really incredibly valuable piece of work for me when I moved on and started Fashion Week. I had huge involvement in the community and still do. I chaired an organisation called Going for Goals in Christchurch and was very involved with Child Cancer Foundation for quite a long time. At one stage I became very ill and I couldn't work. So having started university soon after when I left school, I was only 16 when I went to university, which was far too young. I was so excited to be out of school I didn't concentrate on anything. And I decided to do some Massey papers, which were fantastic. So I studied things like business communication and PR because I was pretty much housebound, and it was an opportunity to do a few things that I particularly wanted to do for myself. During this time also, a friend asked me if I would coordinate what was called the Canterbury Fashion Collections. It was only done once, and I said, okay, well, I'll give that a go. So I did, and that opened a lot of doors, because the following year they started the Corbyn's Fashion Collections, which was a television show. Now, none of you will know it because it stopped before any of you were born. But when I was reading through these notes, it sort of made me realise how far the industry's come in a short time. I was asked to coordinate this fashion show, which involved a lot of different designers in Auckland mainly, but from all around the country. It was 2 big gala evenings where they filmed all of the footage and then edited it all afterwards. So I became the coordinator of that, and then when it changed in terms of sponsorship, Wella took over, I also became the producer of the show. So what I'm trying to say to you is, all along my career, I've been learning new things. And when I started Fashion Week, I used those things as part of the basis of what we did at Fashion Week. Around this time also I became really involved with education, and I chaired an independent school in Christchurch for 10 years, St Margaret, some of you may know of it, and was on the Independent School Council in Auckland for 10 years. As it happens, television companies ditch shows, which they still do now, and they stopped doing the Weller Fashion Collections, and they stopped doing another show which was called Smoke Free Fashion Awards. And these were the only fashion outlets for fashion designers in the country at that stage. And designers then started asking, what are we going to do? How are we going to get publicity out there? So I had lots of meetings with different designers that I'd come to know, and lots of glasses of wine. And at that stage, 4 designers had just done a show in London at London Fashion Week, which was sponsored by Trade New Zealand in those days. And they said, well, why don't we have our own fashion week? And I said, okay. So I'll give it a go. It took me 2 years. And this is where I think you're wanting to know, if you want to be entrepreneurial, where do you start? You start with an idea, and then you flesh that idea out. So I did budgets. Fortunately, from the experience I'd had, I was able to sort of work out pretty basically what it was going to cost. And I started talking to government and to various other people to try and get the funds together to do it, because obviously I wasn't going to be able to fund it. It took 2 years to convince Trade and Enterprise, they're Trade and Enterprise now, but it was Trade New Zealand in those days, that it was a worthwhile thing for New Zealand, that we could cope with it. And once I actually got some funding from them, it was quite easy to bring on sponsors. They were keen and decided that they'd come on board with us. The first year of Fashion Week was 2001, and I'm sure that rings a bell with many of you. It was 9/11. The first show was going to be in October. And we had all of these international guests coming that had taken quite a lot of time to convince them to come to New Zealand and see our designers. And they started falling off every day, one by one. We'd get a phone call saying, our company won't allow us to fly. And I thought, well, we're doomed. Here we are doing an export fashion week, and we can't have anybody to export to. However, the designers themselves needed buoying up at that stage, and they said, come on, let's just do it. Even if we only have the Australians here, we'll make it a good week. And we did. It was fantastic. And it was fortuitous, really, that those people couldn't come from afar from England and from the States, because I really didn't have the money, enough money to be able to do it anyhow, so it sort of saved me. Michael and I we didn't do it because we had a great love of fashion. We are very casual in our own lives. We did it because we wanted to do an amazing event. After the first year, Maiken came home from overseas. She'd been away for 10 years. I didn't think she'd ever come home. And we talked about her going back again, and she said, well, I'll only come home for a year on the proviso that you promise you won't try and stop me going back if I want to go back. So I had to make that promise, because every time she came home I tried to stop her going back. And she was home for 6 months, and I said, or for a few months, and I said, look, you can help me for 6 months, because I'd just done the first fashion week. I could see that doing the production, looking after the designers and sponsors was really too much. And Maiken had done a BA at that stage, and she'd had quite a lot of experience in events and things overseas. And I thought, I'm sure you can do what I need you to do. After 6 months, she said, I'm not going anywhere, you need me. And I did. So she built her own career in sponsorship and developed it hugely, which she'll tell you about. When it comes to funding a thing like Fashion Week, it has a number of different income streams. One, of course, from designers, who are always broke, but they're paid a certain amount to be there. One, and the main one, from sponsorship. At that stage, we didn't have any public events, which eventually were also a big part of the incomes for Fashion Week. Once we set it up, it thrived and just grew year on year. In fact, we really couldn't quite believe the monster that we'd created, and it became incredibly busy. We started in the town hall, and after three years, I think, there, the car park started to crumble. And because the town hall wasn't big enough for what we wanted to do, we put marquees on the car park, and we weren't able to do that anymore. So at that stage, we also had a change of naming rights sponsor, and we moved to the viaduct and set up tents and set up our own little village. Air New Zealand took over as the naming rights sponsor, and that was amazing. L'Oreal, by the way, was fantastic for Fashion Week as well, which was our first naming right. But Air New Zealand, it was quite amazing because part of that sponsorship included a really healthy number of great airfares that we could bring people from all around the world, and they just loved it, and they loved being looked after by Air New Zealand and the hotels and things here. So it was easy for us when we were working with them. It was fantastic, and it was good for them because they wanted to launch a uniform and to be seen as a fashionable airline. So really, I guess the rest is history. We did it for 20 years, and I sold the company in 2021, but continued to run it in 2021 and 22. I'm just trying to think of the years, because over that time, we planned 2 fashion weeks, which both got cancelled a week or 10 days before because of COVID lockdowns. So basically, it was established on the instigation of a number of our top designers, saying this is what we want. After the demise of the television shows, it's a platform for designers to show to the world, to show to New Zealand, and to gain traction in terms of profile. Through my experience in the industry, we developed a magazine. We did television programs, all sorts of things that I could just pull on the experience I had to do quite easily. And the reaction to the industry was quite amazing and very exciting. So that's the background of where we started. So let's move on to, do you want Maiken to talk about sponsorship now, or?
Yeah, I can give a brief rundown.
It's pretty broad. Hi everybody, I'm Maiken. I actually came home after 9/11 because I couldn't keep travelling anymore, and part of the conversation, which Mum didn't say, was, I'll give you a job if you come back home, and I was like, I definitely don't want to work with those fashion people. I am not into it at all. But I had been selling quite a lot in my experience of travelling, and sponsorship, in essence, is being able to sell an idea. In the end, the premise for me was, this event needs this particular thing to happen, this brand can pay for it, and it can become their idea that they take from me, but they do it for us and pay for it. So when, at the height of Fashion Week, we had 60 sponsors. When I turned up, we had L'Oreal, Jaguar, and a coffee brand. And so it grew and grew over the years that we worked together. I worked full-time with Mum for 15 years before I had a child, and then kept on working in the gig a little bit, not as much as that, until the very end. And we did create an amazing event together where Mother bought all the production side, which meant I never had to think about, are there going to be cool designers, are the shows going to be amazing, is everyone going to be happy on that side? Because an unhappy fashion designer is a pretty unhappy situation, to be fair. And we had 120 fashion designers a lot of the time at the gig with around 60 shows. So it was a lot of people to manage. And then we had 60 sponsors, and sometimes there was up to 20 people in each of those teams. So there's a lot of people on my side to deal with as well. And really, in the end, pretty much everything at the event was sponsored. So whatever we needed or wanted or thought would fit with what we were doing, we would pursue them. And we had a really amazing proposition, because by the time we got to early 2000s, around, 2010, 10 years in, it was hot. Everyone wanted to be part of the gig, so it made it easier to sell. But sponsorship is a deal. It's not just give me your money and we'll say thanks and give you a couple of tickets. You become partners with them. It's a relationship where you have to look after them like any relationship. So if they're not treated well, they won't come back. And our mission was to make sure they all wanted to come back, that there was no reason to leave. And because it's a cutthroat market, people would get a new CEO and they'd be like, right, we're not doing Fashion Week. So that was probably the only time we ever really lost sponsors. Air New Zealand was my first big deal. And it was a big deal. It was huge. It was the biggest deal that we ever did at Fashion Week. And they sent me on sponsorship courses. I've been at Fashion Week for 3 years at that point. And I was kind of a bit like, they mustn't think that I'm very good to do this, but it changed my life because it turned me into a sponsorship professional. Because I don't think you can go to school and learn how to do sponsorship. I don't know if that's part of any courses or anything. And I had the machine, which was Fashion Week, to learn it through, and also to deliver through. But we delivered benefits that in all my sponsorship experience, because that's what I still do now. I work mainly on music events and just do their sponsorship. But at Fashion Week, I work with Mum and organise the event as well as doing the sponsorship. So it meant I could guarantee everything that we sold, I could make sure it was going to happen. And that is the key of sponsorship as well, is delivering. So if I hadn't had that experience with Air New Zealand, where they taught me best practice sponsorship with a woman called Kim Skildon-Reid, who, if anyone ever wants to get into sponsorship, she's a really good read to understand even how to write a basic proposal. I don't think we would have gone to the limits that we did, and for me to have the confidence to go and get what we needed, knowing that I knew the business side. So a good example is Jack Stage Michael, who's a really good friend of mine, who I know from Canterbury University and travelling. He got made the youngest partner ever at Chapman Tripp. And we had talked about, we're both quite new, back from travelling, this post 9/11 thing that changed our lives. And he's like, if I get made a partner, we'll talk about sponsorship. And he was made the youngest ever partner at Chapman Tripp. And they were sponsoring opera and stuff. And I was like, come on, we'll do this Fashion Week thing. And they don't really do sponsorship. They just want tickets. But that's not the kind of sponsorship that I wanted. We wanted brands that were going to leverage that relationship. So our leverage ended up being using the special rooms at Chapman Tripp once a year for all my big sponsors to have a day where we upskilled them on sponsorship, brought in Mum, brought in a designer, brought in a professional to teach the language, but use Chapman Tripp as a place to meet, but also the businesses rubbing shoulders together meant that's another benefit of sponsorship, is who you meet in that room together. And that was a huge benefit for those businesses. So for 10 years we worked together, and we had lift up the phone to our lawyers and go, help, we need this right now, can you help us with this? And it was an amazing partnership relationship. So it's thinking outside of the box and understanding what your brand needs and how you can look after each other, because as soon as you stop looking after each other, it's kind of over. So talking about sponsorship is a huge story, but Fashion Week ran on sponsorship. And the designers were the key part of it, but they gave not so much money towards it. But if you didn't have the designers, you didn't have the gig. And then we had to balance the sponsors who want to have as much of a face as Karen Walker, but who's going to write about Air New Zealand when you've got Karen Walker? So unless they're working together, which they were. So it was all about how we could bring it together. And I learned my trade working with my mum, and I'm very, very grateful. I mean, I could speak for hours, but that's probably enough, no? Yeah? Yeah. Are we going?
We're going.
Yeah.
So Dan Pieta, you mentioned kind of the start of your career was when you kind of bought that modelling agency. You said you learned a lot of valuable skills. Do you kind of go through maybe the best one or the kind of top few that really helped you when you branched out and then started New Zealand Fashion Week?
I think you need so many skills in business. So the first thing, of course, is running the finances, because you have to get the money in and the money out and work all of that. So that's probably the first one. But the other one is, particularly when there's a lot of people involved in a business, you learn to handle people. And I was going to say Models, not all models are Einstein, put it that way.
That's why you were struggling on that one.
That's why I was struggling on that one. Some just aren't. And so you learn to handle a lot of different types of personalities and teaching people how to do things. But in any business, when you're employing people, it's really difficult to do. Employment is hard, and you have to be mindful of the people you're employing all the time. You can't think about yourself. It's not about you, it's about them. And so I think the people skills and the financial skills are the most important things I learned first of all.
So for those in the room who have ideas about things that they want to do or passions they want to pursue, what do you think is key in understanding that what you've got or the idea you have is worth pursuing? So whether that be a small business, a charity, or a passion project for a student that they maybe want to monetize or kind of go into deeper, what actually made you realise that New Zealand Fashion Week was something that was going to give back and be impactful?
Can I just say one thing quickly that you should have said before?
What?
So that Mother really believed in herself, and I think that's the key part that she missed out, is like, because everyone said, don't do a fashion week, why would you want to do that? It's not going to make money. Well, maybe it didn't, but she always believed that she could do it, and that has got to be the first key.
I guess Mike has always said I did it from my heart, not from my head, which is true.
It's true.
And I've almost forgotten your question.
What made you realise that New Zealand Fashion Week was an idea that you should go through?
Yeah, well, I think I married into a family who are exporters, and my father-in-law and mother-in-law were so really committed to exporting, and my major reason for setting it up was exporting for New Zealand designers. Now, that's changed a lot now. They don't have to export to big companies or department stores overseas. In fact, a lot of the department stores have gone, so they're exporting online themselves. The other thing is, if you do have an idea, it's really important to talk to people about it. You know, get some like-minded people together, do your own little focus groups. I had that with designers, so they were sure that that's what they wanted to do, so I knew that they were behind it and wanted to export and they wanted to raise their profiles. And it has. I mean, before that, you never knew who any designers were in New Zealand, hardly. So I think just talking to people and just, getting people behind you to be able to make sure that it is an idea that can be monetised, because, otherwise it can be pretty tricky.
Don't do an event that just relies on sponsorship.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a good business model, by the way. It wasn't.
So something the Phillips Society kind of revolves around, well, really likes to look at is entrepreneurship. I don't think I'm saying that right, but what would be your main advice to students who are interested in starting their own business in the future, pursuing their passion? What would be your main advice?
Can I just ask you a question on the side as well with all of that? So you're saying go for it, but does anyone worry about their idea being stolen? Yeah. Is that one of your questions?
No, that's what I worry about.
Okay, so that's what we should also talk about, because that could hold you back on becoming an entrepreneur and going and talking to people.
Yes, there is a bit of that. I think, as I said earlier, get a good idea, like a really good idea.
Believe in it.
Research it. Make sure you really believe in it. And once you get that, and once you do talk to a few people about it, and think, okay, this is a goer, I can do it, then do your budgets as best you possibly can. And if you can't, get somebody to help you. So you know what it's going to cost you to get into it. And then just start doing it, and it can take a long time. As I said, it took me 2 years to get Fashion Week off the ground. And that was 2 years of flying to Wellington and flying up here and talking to lots of people to try and get it funded. And so once I had enough funding together, then I could go with the first one. But it's a long time, and you don't actually ever think of yourself as being an entrepreneur. You just sort of do it, and you sort of are. It's not, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Well, that's good, but it's really not what I was thinking at the time. I just want to do this event and make it great. And mind you, you've got to remember there's fashion weeks all around the world. So it wasn't a unique idea. And I had been to Australian Fashion Week, I'd been to London Fashion Week, I'd been to New York Fashion Week. So I knew what I was, you couldn't do it exactly the same, but I had a pretty good pattern to follow.
This can be for both of you, but what were kind of the toughest moments in running kind of your own program where there's not really a set of instructions for you to follow? But they're kind of a significant challenge or something you remember from that?
It was constant, actually.
Just full on.
Yeah. So what we did is, after the event each year, we would debrief rigorously with everybody. So Maiken would debrief with her major sponsors individually and together in meetings. We would debrief with designers, we'd debrief with our production people, with everybody. And by the time we got to Christmas, with the event being sort of late August, September, we had worked out what had worked from the year that we'd just done and what we needed to change moving forward. And there was always change. And if you think now, when I was talking about magazines before, there's very few magazines around now. There's hardly any media that there used to be. And AI sort of means that in many cases, I don't think you even need to have models to get your collection together, because you can just sort of say, I want a blonde or I want a dark and this tall and that tall, and pop the clothes on in AI. You don't, so all of those things are changing very quickly, and the way designers sell has changed hugely. I guess most of you buy a lot online. I don't, but most people do. And that was never the case. You had to physically go and buy. So there's been a huge change in all industries, but particularly in the fashion industry. They used to create a collection 6 months ahead, and it was a full collection. Now most designers are working very close to the season and just doing really small drops all the time. So it's a changing world with everything, really.
And from my side, it was just full on. When I left in 2015-16, I was on 200 emails a day, 4 or 5 meetings a day. 5 was the maximum I'd let myself do. I had a 2-year-old daughter, and it was just intense, and it was just never stopped because everyone wanted to be part of it. But you've got to think about 60 sponsors. The top one's been over 120k, and they got about 5 to 7 meetings a year. They're multiplying that by 60, and just looking at the sheer amount of contact you're having with people. And so we've got a fashion gig going on, but we're putting on an event. It's like putting on any event. It's like you have 3 months of your life where you've got no life. You are that event, then you're in the event, and then you're completely tired and you wonder where your friends are because you haven't spoken to them for 3 months. And it was just intense, basically. And my line of work rolled differently to everyone else's. So at the Fashion Week, I was hosting up to 20 potential brands for the next one. So they were in the gig, doing the gig. I'm already ahead of that. And when I came out of Fashion Week and doing debriefing, I was already pitching for the following year, then writing the proposal for the following year. So we kept a slightly different schedule because we were doing different things, but it was just so intense. It was just so full on, and we loved it. But it's really nice not to be that full on, and I think part of being an entrepreneur is that you just have to work your ass off and work, and you love it so much and you're so into it, it's all you're thinking about. It's really quite boring for the rest of the family. We just worked really hard. That was the hardest part.
Perfect. Just before we wrap this up, are there any questions from the floor for people? Yeah, out the back, if you want to just stand up and just say
This question's for both of you. Who are your personal fashion inspirations? And what was the style? And in that same vein, what style did you want for your shows?
Ooh, not really into fashion.
You mean designer inspirations?
Yes.
Adrian Harwood is our favourite because he was such a
Yes,
good guy to
he's
work
one of
with.
our favourites.
Yeah.
I'd really say people like John Paul Gaultier for me, and Dior, and those are the designers that I look to. YSL. New Zealand designers have changed a lot over the time that we've been working with them, but Halewood is one, Kate Sylvester, Karen Walker, Zambezi, all of those have been, Trelise Cooper, they've all been very important to us at various times. But as I said earlier, we're not exactly fashion people. We like it. We know sort of what's style and what's not, but I prefer style to fashion, and finding your own style. But there's a lot of good stuff out there, and you've exposed now to everything all around the world that you can access if you want to. What about you?
I've got no comment on the designer part. I just wanted the models to get to the end of the catwalk and to get to the X where the photo was, and often they didn't, and to have an amazing show. And the designers put their own shows on, and that was being surprised by a fashion designer is pretty hard when you've been doing it for 20 years. So it was just, for me, it was just like do a great show, be nice to work with, and pay your bills, hopefully. Oh, is that me? No. Yeah.
Getting to the X at the end of the catwalk, let me explain it. So at the end of the catwalk, there's a bank of photographers. Still is, even though it's changed somewhat.
Sometimes
and we had
hundreds.
an X on the floor. And this is sort of bears to the comment I made before. And the models had to get to the X to be in the light so that the photographers could take all of their photographs.
Is this that spider keeps on jumping?
I've got a spider on me.
Like, so Kyle just loves
But
it.
I love spiders, thank God. Yeah, but if they didn't get to the X, the photographs would sort of have, be all dark in their face and they'd be all wrong. And you'd have no idea how many times we're screaming at the backstage, walk to the X, walk to the X. And they might do it once and then they forget it again. I think they get nervous when they're out there probably, but
They're blind.
yeah, that's what Megan was meaning.
Yeah.
And then at the back, was there one more question?
How did you promote the first fashion week, or was there already a lot of attraction?
I can't remember, to be honest. I mean, it's a long, long time ago, but I did get quite a bit of publicity because it hadn't been done before. So the publicity machine was very kind in those days, and so we got a lot of publicity in the newspapers and in magazines. So I think that's basically how it was promoted. And also television, I think it was TV3 in those days, or C4, came on board and did programs of the shows. What you're seeing behind, I don't know what's playing, but it's just raw footage from 2019, I think this one is. So we just put it up there as wallpaper, really. So yeah, I think it was minimal in terms. I certainly didn't have an advertising budget, if that's what you're asking. And in most cases, in most businesses, entrepreneurial business, you need advertising budget. But you're also promoting things very differently these days with social media, and there wasn't any social media.
By the end with sponsorship, we had around 300k worth of media value with TV, radio, billboard, magazines. You name it, I was wooing them, and we used that as our media. Then when social media came along, and suddenly we had influencers, and I was like, who the hell are these guys? But that really took the next level, because there was no social media when we started. There was nothing like that. It was a whole different scene.
I don't think there was internet.
I don't think there was, Mum.
There was
Yeah, it was
internet?
just. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It has changed.
All right, well, I think it kind of
You happy?
wraps up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dean,
Yeah.
and Martin, for
Just on behalf of everyone here at Phillips Society, I'd like to say a huge thank you for coming in today to share your knowledge. So we'll just give you this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was awesome. I loved it.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to come on now afterwards. Otherwise, get in contact with either myself or Jack, and we can send on any questions. That
Yeah, we're more than happy to
Yeah, and
answer
you
any
can- and you
questions.
can-
if
I'm
there's
easy to
anything
find on
interesting.
social media if anyone ever wants to ask anything about sponsorship.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
perfect. Thanks so
Not
much.
fashion. Yeah. Good.
Thank you both.
Thank you. It was awesome. Yeah, nice one.
Very well done.
You gonna tell your dad you're happy?